Bill Kurtis is a household name to generations of Chicagoans and Americans. I have to say, I'm not much younger than Mr. Kurtis, but I was pleasantly surprised to learn about his early and long list of accomplishments. His tenacity gave him his big breakthrough when he covered a devastating tornado for 24 hours straight while on air. This brought him to the notice of WBBM TV in Chicago, and the rest, as they say, is history. Although most of us know him for his investigative reporting, my husband would say his most excellent accomplishment is providing voiceovers for Anchorman. His career began a new adventure in 2005 when he went back to his Midwestern roots, to Kansas, where he bought a ranch. He saw an opportunity to educate, inform, and provide a service to health-conscious consumers. He started the company Tall Grass Beef to champion the environmental and health benefits of grass-fed cattle ranching. Please welcome me in giving a warm welcome to Bill Kurtis.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, Anchorman was a second career for me because most of the folks who are over 60 will remember Walter Jacobson and I on Channel 2 News, but anyone under that will remember these words. There was a time before cable, when only men read the news. And in San Diego, that man was Ron Burgundy. Pardon me for that. I should say assalamu alaikum. Dr. Chaudhry, Dr. Khathrari, welcome to everybody, and thank you for inviting me. I bought a ranch in Kansas a number of years ago. That's where I'm from. And we had wonderful grasses, terrain like Africa and Scotland and Argentina. We call it the best cattle country in the world. And the problem with being an investigative reporter is that it never leaves you. And so I had to make some money to pay for the ranch I had just bought. And I realized that the number one way cattle and the beef business had changed over the last 60 to 70 years. Once, where cattle roamed the open spaces, eating native grasses and gaining the nourishment there, they were now sold at a young age into feedlots, where they never saw a blade of grass again. The confined conditions created problems over the 6 months that they were there. Breathing in the dust and being fed corn instead of grass during that time, they got diseases. And they developed the wrong kind of fat, a saturated fat that ultimately was implicated in heart disease. It gave red meat a bad name. To keep them alive long enough so that we could eat them, they were given antibiotics and hormones to make them gain weight faster. And suddenly, a wave of criticism and pressure began to sweep over America's beef industry. The European Union barred our corn-fed cattle because their scientists believed that artificial hormones lower the age of puberty when our daughters change into young women. When I started my company 7 years ago, the average age of puberty was about 13. Then it went down to 11. And now the FDA has actually said that the average age of puberty for young women is 7 years old. And the problem with that is that the earlier you start growing breasts, the more susceptible you are to the risk of breast cancer. They and many people now believe that it is our diet that is causing it, along with many other problems. Diabetes 2 is an epidemic among young people. It's called diabetes 2 because so many young people have it, they needed a new name. 1 in 3 people have it or a pre-diabetic condition across the United States. We're in an epidemic of obesity. I found that 70 to 80% of the antibiotics manufactured in the United States are given to livestock to make them gain weight. And the problem is that over 50 years, the bacteria that the antibiotics are designed to kill are smarter than we are. They find a way to get around our medicines to create a new bacteria. In one case, you've heard of E. coli, and it can kill us. Many people believe it's caused by changing the natural diet of a cow from grass to corn. Well, I began looking closer at how we were raising our animals, and found that food manufacturers, in many cases, are trying to trick us, saying that they were making the food taste better by adding enormous amounts of sugar and fat and salt. But in fact, these ingredients were added to make us buy more food. Humans have a sweet tooth. Don't feel guilty? I certainly do. It comes from our early beginnings when we were still hunting on the plains of Africa. We didn't have a supermarket to find our food, so when our ancestors saw a meal trotting by that we had to act quickly, and we needed energy, and fat and sugar gives us that energy boost. We've never lost our desire to stock up on energy in case we see a coyote that looks appetizing. It's a human weakness that has been exploited by many food manufacturers, and too much sugar, fat, and salt is making us sick. 7 years ago, I decided to create a company to do something about it, and that's when I discovered what has been there all along: halal. As you know much better than I, halal is an Arabic word meaning lawful or permissible. It not only covers food and drink, but also all matters of daily life. When it comes to halal food, most people think of meat. However, Muslims were smart from the beginning, knowing that they must ensure that all foods, particularly processed foods and pharmaceuticals, and non-food items like cosmetics, are all halal. How did they know that processed foods would become the scourge of our health? Frequently, these products contain animal byproducts or other ingredients that are not permissible for Muslims to eat or use on their bodies. I named my company Tallgrass after the tallgrass prairie that starts here, incidentally, in Chicago, runs all the way to Kansas, north into Canada. The native grasses grow 8 feet high and hold a great deal of nutrition, perfect for the buffalo that used to roam through here. We were the prairie state, now we're the corn state, 1 million acres in corn, and we have replaced buffalo with cattle. How could I change the industrial factory farms where we force feed our cattle on corn month after month in small, dusty conditions? Well, I learned that most of the problems of the factory farms go away if we just leave the cattle on grass in the pastures, like they did in the beginning, thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of years ago. But we thought we could change nature. We found out differently. I call it grass-fed and grass-finished beef, meaning that they receive no corn, no antibiotics, no hormones. They are not kept in feedlots. It seems simple, doesn't it? But we were trying to change a $400 billion industry. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that my Muslim brothers were doing it all along, halal, and when no halal is available, kosher, so very close to the humane treatment and preparation of meat as halal. So I prepared my cattle on grass, eliminated the artificial hormones, antibiotics, grain, and feedlots, and learned to slaughter them properly, to return to the way God intended to eat, and I now call that halal. It's interesting. A gathering like this has many people here from many countries. And I thought of a bridge that food could be between Mecca and Medina. Tel Aviv, Indonesia is represented heavily here, Malaysia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Australia, Canada, Singapore, Saudi Arabia. We are all here together, and we are eating halal. So I guess I joined the Brotherhood. I want to provide the healthiest, tastiest beef that I can. I was prepared for this path by a life-changing incident while I was a reporter. I was in Iran during the taking of the American hostages from the U.S. Embassy in 1980. If you've seen Argo, you'll know what I'm talking about. I was able to kind of roam the city while my colleagues were tethered to the outside of the embassy covering the story. I was there in more of a documentary flavor, but still for Chicago television. And I went down to the bazaar. Now, the bazaar is where the revolution really started and was fomented, because the Ayatollah Khomeini would send his audio tapes, no videotapes at the time, this is 1980, sent the audio tapes to his people in the bazaar, and they would distribute them to the Revolutionary Guard. I went through and kind of tried to pass ourselves off as French, because Americans weren't welcome there. And I got into a section around the edge, which was the drug section. It was targeted ultimately by the Revolutionary Guards to clean up, but at that time, drugs were everywhere. Now, when I say everywhere, I don't mean like Chicago everywhere. They were shooting up in the gutter. They had opium dens that you would pass by, and the smoke would be coming out, and the users were just kind of almost in a stupor. And so we felt very comfortable. We didn't feel like we were in danger. And I made a mistake. After we got through, I said, well, we missed that shot. I think I need it again. You never go back a second time, because when you're covering difficult situations, the element of surprise is on your side, and you get one, but you better not go back. But we did. And as we walked through, somebody got the word that this was an American crew. And they began gathering and following us. And then they got bigger, and they started chasing us. And we're running down the street, and the addicts are right on our tail. We ran across the street and into a drugstore, a pharmacy of sorts. And there were plate glass windows on the side. The proprietor was behind the counter. And I went, probably my heart in hand, and said, is there a way that we can either go through the back or stay here for safety? And the crowd came up against the windows. I thought they were going to break them, and they began pounding and demanding, yelling to the proprietor, send out the Americans, we want them. It was about as close a situation as I have experienced, and he began to speak to me. And he said, I'm a Muslim. My religion says that if you come into my house as a guest, I will give you shelter and safety, and make sure that you are able to leave the danger that you are facing safely. Thought about that for a minute, and I said, well, maybe he really doesn't mean that. But he was quiet. He walked to the windows. He motioned for everybody to back away. He took us to the door. He parted the crowd and called a cab, and made sure that we were in the cab and driving away. And as I got in, I looked back. I was never more impressed by anybody or by an action in my life. And he was looking right in my eyes, as if he knew that he did what he had to do, and he lived up to his religion. For 30 years, I have been looking for an opportunity to return that gesture. I saw the teachings firsthand, and this is my gift back: a healthy diet, meat made for you and for my brother in that drugstore in Tehran. I call it simply tall grass, halal. And I wish you well. Shukran. Thank you.